All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. I saw we have a global chat room going off, so we're so excited that everybody joined from all around the world. My name is Michael Scognamilio. I'm part of our Asset Outbound product management team, and I want to welcome everybody to another one of our live event sessions. This one called Hardware Asset Management, Setting Up Your First Automated HAM Workflow. This session is the spiritual successor to our last session a couple of weeks ago, Gaining Visibility into Your Asset Estate with HAM. No worries if you didn't catch that one, but I encourage you to check it out and many others in our on-demand section of the live events page. So if this is your first live event, welcome. Scan the QR code here to check out the schedule for any upcoming live event at ServiceNow. These are all hour-long webinars to help you deploy, adopt, and achieve value across all of our ITAM products. And like I said earlier, you'll be able to find an on-demand section where all of our ITAM live events that were recorded are listed. But first, a few announcements. Some of the information that we present today is privileged and confidential, so just bear that in mind. And also, in addition, take a look at our safe harbor notice. The information we'll be showing today could be forward-looking in nature, so please keep in mind that that is subject to change. So with that out of the way, a big warm welcome to everybody on the call. This is one of our commitments to you as a customer to deliver relevant content to you wherever you are in your journey, and also to record that content so you can always go back to it at any time. Today's host is myself, Michael Scognamilio, and helping me is Victor Paredes Colonia, a colleague of mine from the Outbound Product Management BU. And our guest of honor today is Michael Smith, a Principal Inbound Product Manager in the Hardware Asset Management BU at ServiceNow. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So today, like I said, last session we talked about visibility. Today we're going to talk about a lifecycle and workflow overview. And we're going to go through two demos. Michael Smith is going to walk us through two demos here of asset refresh and of disposal with mobile scanning. Please submit your questions in the Q&A form. There's also the chat feature as well if you want to engage with anything. But if you have a question, it's best for you to put it in the Q&A form for our presenters to find them there. Please stay laser focused on the topic of the day and contribute what you know. Like I said, feel free to use the chat feature. And also at the end of this call, there will be an opportunity for you to review and provide feedback to us. We love that feedback and are using it to plan our 2023 live event series. So please participate in that feedback form. So without further ado, let's switch over to the content. So Michael, in our last session that we had a couple weeks ago, we went in on the importance of visibility. So now I'd love for you to talk about how an asset manager should move from visibility into workflows themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the main focuses of the workflows is maintaining that visibility, right? So as we come in and we brought in all of our asset records, we have all these details, but there's lots of entry points where assets not only come into the organization, but they move around the organization. And one of the important things about visibility is maintaining that clear line of sight to your assets. As an asset manager in my previous lives, I would always stress out as soon as the asset left the stock room, because now I'm relying on that technician when they deploy that asset to come back into the asset tool and assign it and update the status and update the location and change all these data points in the records. So our goal with our different workflows that we bring forth is to really follow the entire life cycle of an asset, right? We can manage it when the request comes in and we approve the request and we order and fulfill the requests and we put it in the inventory. We've got that part covered. As an asset manager, I can make sure they're being received properly. I can make sure they're being stored properly. But the second they get deployed, I'm trusting other people in the organization to manage that deployment task, to manage monitoring those and servicing them, maybe during a break fix or a swap or a loaner request. Really making sure that they're updating those records properly. So to that point, our different workflows are really built around that to help manage that.
Got it. Yeah, let's take a look a little bit more about what some of those workflows are. So obviously the last slide showed that you have workflows at every stage in the product journey and the asset journey.
Yep.
But I'm seeing here that there are a number of out-of-the-box workflows. So maybe
Yep.
talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so first and foremost, our workflows are built on our flow designer. So what you're looking at is a screenshot, and I can show a little bit more when we get into the tool, what the flow designer looks like. But they're all built in our prescriptive flow designer, which allows you to make updates and changes as flows come through. Maybe you have a special requirement in a specific out-of-the-box workflow that maybe a certain approval hits or something like that. So that being said, the out of the box workflows we give you are twofold. One, we've incorporated some of our workflow into the incident and change management process. So when we're talking about activities like deployment, swap, break fix, those will happen within our incident management. There'll be a section at the bottom of our incident management tool that will allow you to select the new asset if you're going to do a break fix. Is will allow you to put the new asset. So when you the technician has to do is resolve the task and put in what device they're giving them, and all the asset updates happen in the background. So our out of the box workflows that you can use to publish to the catalog are your standard hardware request. We have a process, and all of these workflows are end to end. So when it comes to standard hardware requests, that includes the catalog step of when they add it to the cart. It covers approvals, it covers the sourcing, right? When somebody asks for a laptop, our first instinct should be do we have it in stock? Do we have it in our current stock room? Or do we need to look at a local stock room and do a transfer order? And then if worst case scenario, we don't have any available, then we can procure that. And the other thing I want to point out too is all of these workflows are part of our hardware asset management product, which is built on top of our base asset management product. The base asset management product is great as a data model, but this is all that automation that sits on top of that. And then we also have a process for tech refresh, which we'll be showing today. Loaners, leased assets. So as leases are coming up to expiration, you can start managing all the activities around that. And then we have a process for RMAs. So as we're doing these break fixes, these assets are now coming back and they're automatically getting put into a stock room, but they're pending repair. Now you have a bunch of assets that are flagged that need to be repaired, and you can proactively reach out to vendors and start scheduling RMAs, whether they're on-site or off-site. And then we have a workflow around the offboarding process, which if an employee leaves the organization voluntarily or involuntarily, there's a lot of tasks around what's assigned to them, whether it's hardware, software, SaaS subscriptions, mobile phones, contracts with the mobile phones. So anything that's assigned to that end user when they go to leave will automatically be flagged with their own reclaim task. Because it's different to reclaim a SaaS subscription as it is to reclaim the physical hardware that they have. So we want to make sure we acknowledge everything that's built to them. And all of our workflows, like I said, can be easily updated. But and why do you want to use these workflows? Well, right here, we're going to automate all the configuration and all the CI and asset updates at every step of these workflows. So when we're talking about a deployment task, right, as we receive that asset, we're automating that asset's now in the stock room that it was received against. When that asset gets deployed to that end user, it's now going to go from no assignment to assigned to that end user, to that location. And the install, the state and substates all get updated. So for every one of our workflows, we've considered every transaction that happens and every task that gets closed. One of these update tasks will run if it's relevant to update the asset record. So no longer are you now praying that the technicians are updating the assets as they do break fixes. All that's happening in the background, and your technicians can jump on the next task and not have to worry about swivel chairing into another system and updating all the asset information.
That's great. And I like that you talked about your experience as an asset manager yourself. Like, it drives home how important this automation is on kind of removing the stress of, asset managers and elevating the work that they're up to.
Yeah, exactly. It was always dreadful when I would walk in, and I used to go to lunch and hang out and do fantasy football leagues with all the technicians. But every time they saw me, they knew I was coming in there to yell at them, to say, "Why aren't you deploying stuff?" And it puts you in a bad position as an asset manager being part of a team on having to go in and really, act as like a parent with that. So
Yeah. All right. So thank you for walking us through at a high level kind of workflow product.
yeah.
I'd love to dive deeper into two separate workflows here. Well, I'm hoping that you can introduce us to Jen and talk a little bit more about the asset refresh process.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jen here is one of our traditional hardware asset managers, right? She's responsible for a state government agency, and her team is responsible for managing all the hardware assets over many departments. And it's struggled because a lot of the processes are manual, right? And there's, sometimes long lead times with procurement. When you have these manual processes, you also run into data errors. And at the same time, when we do a refresh, one of the challenges everyone has with the refresh process isn't so much getting the end user their new device. That's easy because the end users are motivated. They want that new device. They're excited about their new device. But then they lose motivation when it comes time to ship back the old device. And sometimes those devices don't come back, right? You find them in a drawer when that employee leaves the organization. And the thing that we have to remember is when these devices don't come back, the data doesn't come back. The software that's installed on these devices don't come back. So there's lots of risk that you can run into without getting these devices back. I mean, at the end of the day, the laptop, it's the disposal vendor may give you $50 for it, or you may have to pay to have it disposed of, but it's that PII, that intellectual property that's on that device, and all the applications and licenses. I mean, if you have perpetual licenses on the devices, you want to bring those back and harvest them. So being able to manage that, having that end-to-end workflow is critical here. So we have a way within ServiceNow, and by the way, too, I want to thank you guys for using the Q&A. We will do a Q&A session at the end of this call, because some of the questions we may cover in a later section. But thank you for using Q&A for this. But I just want to focus here with this end-to-end workflow. We'll cover the refresh process. There is a way within ServiceNow that we can flag assets that are eligible for refresh, right? Today, we have a useful life field on the model record that allows us to put in a date that you can basically decide when that asset is end of life. And that date now can leverage our content that comes from normalization. If you remember in our previous discussion, we talked about all the great lifecycle data that comes from the content service. So now you can see that, okay, this laptop is going to be maintained. This model, the vendor is offering support for 3 years. Your warranty, you may have a 3-year depot warranty. So you can feel very confident with a 36-month useful life. Or if you want to stretch that out, a lot of organizations will do a 42-month end of life for a laptop because they think, well, look, after 3 years, if it breaks, they're going to get a brand new one anyway. And maybe we can stretch that out and stretch our dollar out for, for an extra 6 months. But point being is having these dates will allow you to better forecast your activities for refresh, and having a cleaner visibility into your asset estate. Now you can look and see what everyone has, right? So you can look in and see, what's coming up this year, what's coming up in the next 90 days, 60 days, 6 months, however you want to plan this out. So instead of having to do these proactively, or not proactively, reactionary, and having to say, okay, I need to go get this laptop, you can say, look, I've got 500 laptops that are coming up end of life this year. Let me procure those 500 now, set those aside, and we can flag these assets as refresh, and we can schedule these out. Our tech refresh workflow is scalable, so it can be done for one single asset. I can get Michael or Victor a new refresh rate today, or I can get an entire department or an entire location or an entire cost center. And I can put all their assets into the process and start a refresh for multiple, up to 1,000 at a time. So we can go to the next slide, please.
Actually, I think at this point, Michael, I think you were going to show us a little bit under the hood in the platform.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm going to go ahead and confirm when you can see a very pretty looking dashboard.
I can see it.
Awesome. So one of the things I do want to show, and how quickly we can get value out of HAM, is one of the things that when we turn HAM on is there's a guided setup feature. And I'm kind of going off script here, but I want to show this because there's a lot of value to this. Now, if you've already done your setup, you're going to have to go back in and update the tasks to show that you've completed it. But when you come in here, you have an opportunity to walk through this guided setup to turn these things on. And so all of our workflows are in this selection here. So when we just jump into configure, you can see these are all of our different workflows that you're going to get out of the box. They're active day one. So you don't have to do anything. They're already on, they're already running. And if you want to go in the Flow Designer, you can jump in the Flow Designer and edit any of these. But day one, you can have access to these, you can turn these on. But definitely recommend going through the guided setup. It takes a couple hours to do, but you can ensure that all your HAM functionality is live on day one. But I just wanted to call that out real quick because this is a new feature that just came out a few months back in our Tokyo release. So it makes it a lot easier to get value and hit the ground running with these. But
yeah, this is really great for like when you just install, like knowing the steps that you need to take right from the get-go and monitoring those steps. And so really good tool for our customers.
Perfect. So I'm gonna jump in and show how as a fulfiller, our refresh workflow is technically really should be for back-end processes. As an organization, I've seen customers automate this process. So as an asset hits its useful life date, it could initiate a request to the end user. You could set that up in your, an email could get sent to an end user when their laptop hits that threshold, and they could get a selection of laptops to choose from, and that could spin into this existing workflow. There's all kinds of cool things that you can do with our out-of-the-box workflows. But I just want to jump in today to our service catalog to give you guys a view of what it would be like out of the box, no special updates if you wanted to initiate this as an asset manager. So like I said, you can come in to the asset lifecycle section. This is where all of our lifecycle workflows, and this is, once again, this is our fulfiller view, because this is something that most companies don't want to push to the portal. Because if an end user has the ability to do a refresh request, you've got people, you know who they are. Every 6 months, they're going to ask for a new laptop. They're going to ask for new stuff. That's just who they are. So we don't want to publicize this and put it to the portal. You can if you want, perfectly up to you for your organization. If you have a business need to do so, I don't recommend it. I usually like to initiate these myself. So when I come in here as an asset manager, I have the ability to do a single model refresh or multi-model refresh. Once again, this comes into a, whatever the scope of this is, I can come in and I can select what model I want for my replacement. So what's my new standard? What am I going to do for a replacement? And I can pick that model here. And then out of the box, the filter is the asset has to be eligible for refresh. So you can see right now, you don't have a lot of assets in this demo environment that are eligible for refresh. So I can go and I can break this reference here, and I can make any filter I want. So remember when I said earlier, I could do this based on a location. I could say, you know what, today I want to do a refresh for my Dallas office, and I want to go in and do all my Dallas assets. But in this case here, I'm just going to come in and I'm just for an example, I'm just going to grab any old model, and I'm going to look for one that contains Apple, just for the sake of this. And I'm going to run this filter. So now it's going to give me the ability, I can select, these are all my assets that are in my demo environment here that have Apple. I just want to grab one for the sake of this demo. Preferably one, and I get an update down here. This is a good one because this is in use. So this is in someone's hands, and we can do an actual, a good example here, and I just drag and drop that. If I wanted to select all these and do a refresh for all of them, once again, it's completely scalable. So I can add all those, and I can click order. Oops, I have to put in the model that we're going to give out. It looks like I selected the wrong one. We're going to go ahead and give this model as a refresh. And then we're going to go ahead and order it. So now that there's been an order submitted, now granted, I didn't put a requested for in because I did this on the back end. So I could put in the person that it was requested for. I don't remember who the person was when they assigned it. So that was my bad. But from an end user, from a fulfiller point of view, now there's a refresh request for that. I can log into my hardware asset workspace, and I can look at all my tech refresh requests. So you can see that there's 7 of them active right now at various stages, right? We've got some that are in the fulfillment stage, some are awaiting approval. So I can just jump in and I can grab any of these in whatever stage they're in. This one's in the fulfillment stage right now. So I can look at this and you can see here that, this needs to be approved. I would go and work the approval. There's also a stage if we dive into these, where if I look at, bear with me here, if I look at one that's in the refresh stage, there's different tasks that need to be executed. So I can see here that there's now a hardware asset refresh task for this one, where I can look at this refresh line here, and I can see that this is in the planning stage. So, the point is there's going to be multiple people managing different tasks related to the refresh, right? You're going to be doing the sourcing, but somebody else might be doing the prep work and doing the deployment. So you can see here that this has been approved, this asset's in stock. So we need to, this is the replacement asset. We need to prepare and stage it for deployment. So basically at each stage of this process, the assets get updated. You can see that this is the actual asset that was flagged as part of the refresh. And then once this gets closed and it's been prepared, oh, I didn't put in the actual asset record. So, oops. So once this will get closed out, you'll see that there'll be another task on this asset. Normally this stuff doesn't happen in this quick succession, so I'll have to do a refresh here. Because these process to do a refresh can take days, can take weeks, right, to get in the equipment. So now you'll see there's a new task to schedule the refresh. So this is where you reach out to the end user, and we've all been there. End user may have to do finish a project before they can complete this, right? They need to use some some of the data. They just can't do the refresh. Maybe they're going on maternity leave. They'll be back in 9 months. But this is where you would come in and you would schedule schedule the deployment date. So we could say for this, I could do it today. If I was to pick a future date, it would pause the workflow, right? Because everything is based on a trigger. So I would want to ensure that I can pick, we can do the refresh today and we can save it. Now that it's been scheduled, we can close the task. And now another task will execute for the actual deployment of the phase. And in the interest of time, I'm just trying to cover all the bases here. There's a lot of other details that we would capture, like moving the software over and all that other stuff as well. Deployment is normally a bigger process because you have to image, you have to deploy. We do have something coming. This is a lot of customers are using zero touch refresh. That's something that we have coming in an upcoming release. So for this here, we're doing a refresh. If we reclaim the asset at the time, how great is it when the customer shows up for the refresh, they have their new device ready for them, but they also brought their old device. So they're ready to do that swap. In some cases, maybe they want help transferring their files. Maybe they're, whatever your policies are for data retention and stuff like that. Maybe you don't allow them to store in a drive. With us, I know a lot of times all of our stuff is stored in OneDrive, so we don't, devices swaps really easy. So if you reclaim it here, you can acknowledge that you reclaimed the old device, but if you didn't reclaim, then it recreates a reclaim task. So now you have a task that can be tracked and executed, and we can escalate. There's SLAs you can put on that to ensure that you get that old device back. So now if we get the device back, it's been reclaimed. And if we look at this asset record here, you'll see if we dive into this replacement asset now, you'll see all the information will be updated, right? You'll see that it's in use, and you can see here that it's been part of a transfer order. You can see here that as it gets executed, it'll be part of a lifecycle event, and all the details get updated. So that's, essentially the refresh workflow in a nutshell, to kind of give you guys a high level of what it looks like. Once again, if you guys have unique processes that don't account for some of the stuff we brought up, potentially we can, you can add those as they will be.
Wow, you just compressed a number of steps that might take days, weeks into about 5 minutes. So give yourself a pat on the back. Thank you for walking everybody through. the asset refresh. And I think one of the main takeaways that, it's back to one of the original slides about automatic and how really any leaky, like any hole in this flow, ServiceNow plugs, whether it's through these automated updates or something of that nature, where again, making the life of all people involved much easier and simpler and elevating their work. Fantastic. If you have any questions on the information that Mike just walked through, please use the Q&A and we will be circling back to those live.
There is one thing I did want to bring up in the sourcing task. Is there is the capability to first look at what's in stock at a specific stock room, and then compare it to what is in your warehouse. Apologies, I forgot to mute my Teams. Sorry.
That's okay. You're a busy man. We're lucky to have you for this.
But point is you have that ability. I know there was a question in the chat, right, to look at the fulfillment team's location rather than a requester location. That can absolutely be considered as part of your unique workflow. Normally one of the things, and I'm going to share here, it's a roadmap item that'll be coming in our Vancouver release, is the ability to show the service locations as opposed to what physical locations that they service. So that might be something that you'll see there. So, and once again, the assigned to was blank on the refresh process. When I did that workflow, I was flying through. Normally you would put the person you're doing the refresh in there, but to expedite, to compress the entire demo, I left a few blanks out of the request form, like their location, the person. I just grabbed an asset and just kind of ran with it. But normally you would put that information there, especially if you have 50 refreshes you're doing, you would have 50 people you're doing you'd be requesting it for 50 people. So that's why it was blank. So that I just wanted to call that out. Sorry, go on ahead. And we'll get back to the rest of the questions at the end there, but those were pertinent to this specific workflow.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so that was the asset refresh workflow, and we'd love for you to walk us through, introduce a new character on the next slide, talk about disposal with mobile scanning. And
sure.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. So when we talk about disposal, we have Casey here. Casey's, asset manager for a regional hospital, and at this point, the technology is a big investment, right? And there is opportunity to get a return on your investment with different vendors, but more importantly, that data that's on the devices, it's very critical that we can show as a device leaves an organization that we've done everything we can to ensure that the data has been properly wiped. So there's all kinds of, I can share, I worked for a government financial organization before coming to ServiceNow, and we had a very stringent data destruction policy where we ran software to do the DoD 7-layer wipe. We pulled the drives out, put them in a degausser to, basically use a magnet to wipe all the data. And then we physically took that asset, put it on a drill press, and drilled 3 holes through, and we had tasks for each one of these steps because you'd have somebody would end up with a box of drives and have to do each one and mark it. And then the final step was we had a company that came out, Shred IT, that had a conveyor belt. We put the asset, and a camera would actually film the data plate on the drive, and it would go down the conveyor belt and it would get shredded, and the whole process was recorded in a 12-second video, and we would have to attach that 12-second video to the asset record. So imagine having to do that for 20,000 assets a year. But
wow,
the process, and once again, all of our workflows are pretty easy to add to that. So our disposal process accounts for all the major muscle movements of the disposal process, right? As assets are coming back in, especially from refresh, right? Those aren't going to go back in the general population. Those are going to be put in inventory, but pending disposal. So as your assets start to build up to pending disposal, you're going to want to initiate a disposal request with your vendor. Maybe you do a quarterly, disposal pickup. But the idea is there's a lot of manual updates that need to happen, and to show that chain of custody moving out of your organization. to account for all the assets are as they're being disposed. So that being said, we have this end-to-end workflow that covers every single step. And another thing to keep in mind too is you have we have the mobile capability. So if you have a mobile device, you can validate that the assets that you're going to dispose are the actual assets. So I can sit at my computer and I can select 50 assets that are in my stockroom that are pending disposal that I want disposed. But I actually have to put my hands on those assets. And I need to show that audit trail that somebody, maybe it was me, maybe it was the team that works in the loading bay, I actually verified and validated that the assets that we plan to dispose were disposed. And then when that disposal vendor comes up, right, because there's going to be a gap in time before you schedule this and the team actually comes to pick up your assets, assets can grow legs. I had one of my organizations, I found a bunch of assets started showing back up again in one of our clients. They were being used. They were pending retirement. Those assets should not be being used. Come to find out, somebody had stolen them and they have been reselling them. And as people logged into them, the agent called home and showed that. So a lot of people assume that, oh, it's junk, I'm just going to take that home. And some organizations may have not had a process around disposal. So this is one of those areas where assets can grow legs and walk away. So with that, when the disposals go out the door, you can have somebody either using a cell phone or possibly a Zebra scanner that has Android OS built into it that can install our application. And you can scan in the assets as they go out the door, which is really cool.
Wow. So I love that. And again, love the experience from your past life and how you bring that to the product to make everything easier. I think it'd be great if you could walk us through an asset disposal workflow.
I would love to. So I'm going to go ahead and let me know when you can see our workspace again.
I can see it.
All right. So as an asset manager, day in the life, you're going to come in and you're going to see disposal orders already in different flight stages. But to create one, you would just come in and you could actually just create one from here and just click new and create a new disposal order. And this is where we schedule the order, right? What stockroom we want this disposal to be initiated from? Who's going to be doing this disposal? Who's going to be the one that's going to actually be there, that's going to be responsible for all these assets? And then what vendor are you going to have doing? And I just grabbed the first one in an alphabetical list, right? So now I can create this disposal order. And now we have to associate what assets are we going to dispose of. So I can use this filter here and I can go ahead and I can pick, right now it's showing the assets that are planned. But I don't have anything planned, so I can come in here and I can wipe out this filter and we can create a new filter here. I think I picked the Santa Monica warehouse, so we can look for any assets that are in that warehouse, right? But right now it's looking for the specific, there's a task here where I have to go in and add these assets. So I can come in here and I can associate what assets I want to be added. But one of the things that you're going to see here is there aren't anything. So I'm going to have to add some assets. If I had a live and working environment, I would be able to easily scan my pending assets that are pending disposal. But in this case here, I would have to come in and I could just select a couple. I'm just going to grab one just for sake of the demo here. So now we have the task. But in a real world environment though, we're going to be coming in and there's going to be multiple, most of our organizations, you're going to have multiple assets in different stages or different disposal. You can see the one I just created, just this number 101. So you're going to see here, you've got, you have this stockroom here, and we do a lot of demos. So you'll see that there's multiple ones in here. But I can come in here and I can look at any of these here that are in any state. And just at a high level, I don't want to, go into this in great detail, but I can show you that these are all the tasks that are associated with the disposal. So you can see here the first task, and you can see what state they're in, right? The first stage was to verify the assets that were planned for disposal. So now I can go back and I can look at this record. And I can see at this verify stage, there were 3 planned assets. And you can see here that these assets have already been put into in transit, because this is an older task. But somebody had to come in and essentially select these and hit the verify button or scan them with their mobile device, right? But what we can see here in this workflow, that we verified them, we scheduled the pickup. So at this stage, you would go in and you would actually put what date the vendor was coming, who was coming from that vendor. But at this stage, right, you will have contacted your disposal vendor. You'll let them know, like, you're only picking up 3 assets. You don't need the flatbed. You can just bring a van, right? Or we're bringing 3 pallets on. You better bring, a big truck. And then at the departure stage, this is where the assets that get departed get actually scanned. So now we're just waiting for the vendor confirmation. But the cool thing is because of that, all of these assets were put in an in-transit state, right? So we can jump into this vendor confirmation task. And this is at the stage of the workflow when our disposal vendor has informed us that, yeah, we've got your assets, everything. You had 3 that you said were coming. We're confirming that we received those 3, and we can go ahead and we can close this task. We've gotten the confirmation that the vendor has received it. Simple as that. So now when we go back to this disposal workflow, you'll see here that there's going to be a new task for the disposal documentation. So this is critical. This is when the disposal vendor sends us an artifact, whether it's a certificate of disposal. It could be something as simple as an Excel doc with their disposal that acknowledges that, yes, we can say we've confirmed that these assets were disposed of. And we would put in here yes, and we would go ahead and we could close this task out. And then there's one step here where we would have to physically attach those attachments there. It won't let me even close it out, so I'm going to go ahead and just attach my headshot. That's fun, but it's going to be essentially acknowledgement that this is what was attached. So when we close this task out, this was included. And now it should let me close the task. Oh, I didn't schedule these for plan. Bear with me, sorry. Now we can officially dispose of these assets because we have the official headshot to do that. But you can see here now that these assets, if you remember just a minute ago, we're in an in-transit state. Now they've officially been marked as retired. Vendor confirmed it. We got the documentation, so now they're all disposed. And we can actually drill into any of these asset records. And now that this process has been completed, the disposal has been completed, you can see that every stage of the disposal process was tracked as an activity. And once again, retired, disposed, and we can come down to the disposal section and we could see here, this is the disposal number. Here's the vendor. Here is the ID number the vendor provided. Here's the date the disposal happened, right? All that information's there. And if they did a resale, you can come back in and maybe they resold it and gave you $100 credit for this. Whatever your agreements are, it's different. Some companies pay to have their stuff disposed. Some do a co-sign. Some do straight recycling. However you do it, it can be plugged in there. If you did a donation, we have a donation workflow coming up, very similar to disposal. The beneficiary would be put in there. So the disposal, the donator, who you donated it to, could be listed there. But that's neither here nor there. But the point is the asset was updated at every stage of this process. There was a consistent auditable process that you could track and you can manage, once again, at scale, because in most cases, you're going to have multiple disposals going at any given time. So you can see here at each stage where all your disposals are at and what assets are involved in it. But more importantly, whether you're being audited by HIPAA, SOX, FISMA, whatever your governing auditing body is, or even it's an internal, you're going to have that chain of custody. So you'll be able to show every asset that was left your organization and all the details around it.
Wow. Okay, fantastic. And I know you mentioned, my understanding of the disposal workflow is that when it comes to ESG as well, having this documentation is incredibly important. Thank you for walking through the disposal workflow and also some of the mobile capabilities we have. I know I think you can probably stop sharing now. We can move over to the Q&A. I see a lot of questions popping up in the chat. Thank you all for being such an engaged audience. And yeah, thank you, Michael, for ripping through those demos like a pro.
Yeah.
So let's start looking here. Thank you guys. Keep the questions coming. I'll start with this question from Dale. When a customer implements Ham Pro, you will automatically affect incident and other better together modules with the Ham Pro workflows.
Yeah, so the big one is incident management. There's a existing tab that can be manually updated today at the bottom of any incident record for hardware. It says affected CIs. So when somebody calls in an incident, say they have a broken screen, they're going to either report it against that, or the whether it's virtual agent, whether it's caller, whether it's a walk-up, we're going to capture that configuration item in the incident. So we already know the broken incident. What we don't know is what the new incident. So there's a little button that they can hit to do, that says asset action that will now appear on any hardware asset incident. And you can do a retire. You could simply just retire. You can say it's broken. I don't want a new one. Just come get it. They can retire it. They can do a break fix, and so on and so forth. Or they can deploy a new asset depending on what the nature of the incident is. Same thing with change management. If you're doing a change request, there's that affected CI tab down at the bottom that automatically appears when you installed Ham Pro. I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. We have a question actually near the bottom to see from Vinti, which is about the demo that you were just showing. And we might be too far gone now, but I'm curious, why does the state show retired twice? I believe that was during your disposal workflow.
Oh, yeah. So there's a state and a substate. So we have a state, a retired, and then the asset when a retired asset could be disposed of, it could be lost or missing, it could be donated. There's different substates to go along with it, but from a state perspective, the asset's retired. I hope that makes sense.
All right, thank you. And John, will this demo be available later for playback? Yes, we will be in a couple of days. You can find this demo and this recording on the event page, and it'll also be on YouTube as well. Okay, Anthony is asking, so we use SCCM to populate our user field as part of Ham. We recently found that the CI is updating the assigned user, but the asset record is not syncing, showing assigned user. Is that expected?
So we normally don't recommend populating assigned to by who is the user on the device, simply because you could have someone from the service desk sign into someone's device to install software. And we provide you with this end-to-end process that will, through process, update assigned to on the asset record. Now, you could have reports that show, and also too, that how assigned to looks when somebody logs in. Like when I log into my laptop, I log in under the name Micah.Smith. Now, my name's not Micah, it's Michael, but because there's a million Michael Smiths in the world and a bunch that work at ServiceNow, I don't have Michael Smith. So my assigned to on my asset record says Michael Smith. It's my username in ServiceNow. And there's other Michael Smith usernames in ServiceNow, but we're differentiated by a lot of other information. But my username when I log into my computer is Micah.Smith. So if I was to use those, they may not sync properly. But I can create a report and I can glance at it and I can look for deltas to see when the assigned to and the user is different. But that point though is through our different workflows, whether it's deployment, whether it's refresh, whether it's incident management, there's lots of opportunities to ensure and automate that assigned to information being updated. And I wouldn't rely on discovery to do that. Especially you could have two tools running at different times of the day, and you could have devices that are considered shared. Like you could have a kiosk at in HR, you could walk up, or IT, and somebody could sign into it. And if you're using that logic, that managed device could get automatically updated. So that's and just going down the list here too, I see a question for the scanning of RFID with Zebra scanners. In our previous release in Tokyo, we have introduced a store app with a partnership with Zebra, so you can use RFID in Zebra. That would automate a lot of the location updates that happen. And you can also use the Zebra mobile computers. There's the MC series of scanners. The ones you see people at like Target or warehouse users using it has a touch screen and a little keyboard and a little trigger that will shoot a little laser out to scan barcodes. As long as it's an Android OS, you can download our ServiceNow app. We're working with Zebra to get our app actually pre-installed or loaded in their store. So it makes it that much easier for your technicians or warehouse people to install on that. There's another question about pulling from the request on the legacy asset. So that came back to the refresh workflow that I was showing. When you select, you can also search by user. So if somebody actually comes and says, hey, I need to do a refresh, we find too, when we start improving our asset estate, we may not have all the assets in our database. You may have a legacy asset that's 7 or 8 years old that might not have a client, and it might not be used in a network that's on site, so it may not be scanned from discovery. So you're going to have end users come up to you and say, look, I've had this old, it's a gateway. How long's gateway been going, right? And you'll need to do a request for them. So you can actually, when you fill out that refresh workflow, you can search by user and pick one of their assets if you want to as well. There's the next question I'm looking at. It says, does HAM offer any workflows in relation to the analysis of asset versus asset data? So if it's not reporting, it can reach out to the end user to find out why. So we do have a report in one of our dashboards. I can share my screen real quick and show you, because it's a pretty cool thing, because it actually answers the exact question that you're bringing up. And that's discovered versus undiscovered assets. So I can look and say, look, these assets here are being discovered, but they're in a state where they shouldn't be discovered. They're either retired assets or they're in inventory, but for some reason, discovery is finding them. Same thing with undiscovered. These are assets that are in use, but for whatever reason aren't being discovered. What you decide to do with this information is completely up to you. I've seen some organizations just drill into it and manually tackle these, or they have a task flow that they'll create that'll be initiated. So as soon as an asset, and we put, I think it's 30 days or 7 days, I can't remember what the threshold is, because we give a little bit of leeway, because you're going to have assets that are returned part of reclaim that might have been discovered yesterday, but they're showing in stock in use. So we do have reporting on that, but we don't have any automation behind that. We do have some other things that we do from a data perspective, but keep in mind, data quality is improved greatly by HAM, but it's not the responsibility of HAM, right? You still have to manage your data. You're still going to have to ensure that, there's certain fields that can't be, you can't discover. So you're like purchase order, you can't discover a purchase order. Now, if you have a process, we can give you a process that'll help you catch that purchase order information. And then we've got this important action up here. So if you are missing manufacturer, location, acquisition method, right? Here's what I was just referring to as purchase order, right? So when you log into your dashboard, you can see I've got 451 assets that are missing a purchase order. And I can pull this data up. And once again, we can do the analysis, but what you decide to do with this data will align with your data governance. And you can see a lot of these are business services. So you're not going to have essentially a PO on a business service, but you can, like any table, you can filter that out, and you can dive into look for actually like hardcore assets, like a server. The server should have been purchased under a PO, and you can tackle that information there and track that back. The next question is the out-of-the-box flow that has sourcing on the request level. Is there a way to make that happen on the requested item level? So the requested item would be associated to that request. So if I put in a request for 3 different things, when I do the sourcing task, it'll show all 3 things that were part of the request. So to your point, each item will be on the sourcing task, because you may have somebody may come in, they go and they fill their cart up, they request a laptop, a monitor, maybe a keyboard. And when we look at the sourcing task, we may say, well, the keyboard's in stock, but we have to buy the laptop and we can transfer the monitor from another location. So all those activities would come off the sourcing task. The next question is, we are not planning on including grid and RU location for data centers at this time. That's not in our current roadmap. It's more of an ITOM functionality. We do have something exciting coming in Utah around island space for stock rooms. So any asset that's in a stock room, once you do Utah, you can now put aisles and spaces in, because we're more focused on the assets The data center stuff, that's more of an operational thing, and that would be managed by Tom. The next question is,
And Michael, just there was a follow-up question from Ben on what you talked about sourcing occurring at the request level. There a way to make it happen at the requested item level, and what if it needs approval first?
Absolutely. So you can't source an asset, source a request until it's been approved. Approval is the first step. We do see a lot of organizations can automate that. So if it's under $500, it's auto approval. So if I need a mouse, no one's going to question it. It's automatically going to go for approval. But you won't be able to source until it's been approved. You're right. So the next question is around how do the ham states and substates align with the CI status and the CSDM lifecycle? We've managed our states and substates to align with a common service data model. There's documentation online you can look into for CSDM. You can see all those mappings there. We've accounted for that. So all of our states and substates for the asset and the CI, the synchronization there, all of that aligns with the new CSDM. And you can look into our documentation on CSDM. But there's too many mappings to discuss, and this isn't the forum for that. But we can definitely, we have plenty of documentation around CSDM. And then the last question here is, can you share more about the user interaction with ServiceNow Asset Management on a Zebra handheld Android scanner? So it's the same mobile experience that you have. We have, once again, tons of documentation on our mobile app for Asset. In Asset, we have two different mobile apps. We have an employee app that I can go in as an employee, that I can look at my assets. I can submit a request. I can go to the catalog and ask for things. I can submit an incident against my assets. That's what every end user is entitled to with our remote app as part of our base ITSM license. From an asset management perspective, any user without HAM can look at their assets. They can see what's assigned to them. From a HAM functionality, we have a mobile receiving that can be done. You can receive, if you're a remote worker, you can receive your assets from home, and so on and so forth. From a fulfiller app on our mobile app, you've got the ability to do receiving. And once again, when I say receiving, whether it's the tablet, phone, any iOS or Android device can work with our mobile app. If you're using a Zebra scanner, for example, it's nothing more than an Android device. It's a really fancy cell phone or tablet, for lack of a better description. But you would disable the camera feature on the Zebra and turn on the scanner. So you wouldn't be able to do QR codes, but you would do standard barcodes perfectly. And then you can also do audits, disposal scanning, and stuff goes out the door as well. And you can look up and create assets as well with the mobile app.
Yep. And I linked to our previous webinar we did where you can learn more about that and more with Michael Smith and some representatives from Zebra.
Yeah, and that's with the RFID solution with the radio frequency tags. So the last question, so the app based on role, what we have, I don't know what you have, but when you go with HAM, there's new roles, but they align with the standard asset roles that come with ITSM.
Great. And we got one more question that just popped in. From looking at the community post on this topic, the sync is not bidirectional between CI and asset states, and there are discrepancies between all the state-related fields, even with the CSDM lifecycle sync.
Yeah, so that would be for our CSDM. We're consumers of the common service data model. We're not responsible for it. There are dependencies on that you're using the out of the box. If you're using custom states and substates, there's a lot of issues with that as well. But I'm not one of the CSDM experts across the board. I would definitely look into that from a CSDM standpoint. And what HAM is, HAM Pro. It's hardware asset management, and we refer to it as HAM just because it's easier to say 1,000 times HAM as opposed to hardware asset management. But HAM is a licensed product that you would pay for. It's not part of any other package. It's its own thing. We haven't bundled it yet. We haven't grouped it with anything else. So there are some other products within the ServiceNow platform that do leverage a couple HAM features, but those I don't know those off the top of my head. They're hard to keep track of. But Maybe FSM uses a couple ham things, but it doesn't give you full ham access. We'll call that out. But for the most part, yeah, Michael brought up the perfect slide here. Ham is the stuff in the green, similar to software asset management with SAM. SAM, both of these build off our base asset management product, but we're giving you the normalized data, we're giving you all the optimization and automation that comes with our flows, and a bunch of other really cool features that make it easier for your hardware asset management teams to get out of the data management business and into the asset management business.
Yeah, if you are a customer who's currently using some of the asset management features in our ITSM, and you're curious or want to learn more about hardware asset management / Ham Pro, I encourage you to reach out to your account teams, and we'd be happy to talk more about that. Wow, that was a great Q&A. This is our last live event of the year of 2022, and so we're really happy to go out with a bang. Of course, today's webinar will be featured online, so you can rewatch it as many times as you want. And there are also a lot of additional resources here. You can see these white papers and user guides that Victor will be sharing in the chat that will also be on the event page and also in the community portal. So we encourage you to review the community portal and check out what we have available for all your hardware asset management needs. And of course, the trainings are very important as well. Make sure you're taking those trainings and staying fresh, particularly as we continue to release new family releases. If the ITAM community is really your best bet at the first place to start, there's a number of resources just right on there, listed in order for your convenience, in addition to other helpful documentation. So we encourage you to check out that ITAM community. With that, thank you very much for joining our last live event of the year. Thank you, Michael Smith, for walking us through 2 demos. Hope you give your voice a break. Hope this was helpful. And we hope to see you in the new year at upcoming live events. Thank you very much.